Please join me in welcoming Baylor President Ken Starr.
Thank you, Evan.
Mr.
Thank
President,
you very much.
thank you again for being here. Put you right over there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you here finally, sir.
Good to be here.
Appreciate
Thank
you making the time and taking the trouble. It's always busy this time of year to be here, so thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks.
I thought we might begin by talking about West and the memorial service last Thursday. You know, Baylor has the distinction of being at the center of its community, and its community is at the center of Texas. And it seemed to me that never was Baylor at the center of the center more than it was last week for that memorial service. Can you say a word or two about that? You hosted the President, Mrs. Obama, but also really the nation by extension in mourning those days.
Well, we were very honored to be the site of it, and it really was the culmination, even though the concern and outpouring continues for West. On the night of the tragedy, our students rushed into action, faculty rushed into action. We had nursing students who were there as first responders. We have in the student body volunteer firemen, firefighters. And so this is really Baylor at its best in responding to this tragedy. In fact, President Obama noted that Baylor students stood in line to give blood on the day after for 5 hours, literally a 5-hour wait. When Carter Blood Center opened, the line was remarkable, and the majority of people in that line were Baylor University students. So we were very pleased, Evan, to be able to hold this very somber ceremony, and it was so beautiful. The president was marvelous. The nation heard him. The governor was very effective. So it was a great, it was a unifying experience at a time of partisanship. It's great to, when we do have a tragedy, to remember we are one people who are united by a common cause. So Baylor was very honored.
And I would say, of course, you'd do anything to have not had to have that memorial service. But you know,
absolutely.
Baylor has been, and you have worked hard over these years as president to be sure that Baylor is a public square, as most universities wish to be, the place where the community comes together to talk about big issues, to gather at moments, good and bad. That's been a priority of yours, I know, in the time you've been.
It has. We have, and John Barry, my colleague from Baylor, is here, has been very instrumental in helping organize a series of conversations we call, pardon me, on topic. We just had Senator George Mitchell, who was marvelous to talk about the issues in the Middle East and so forth. So yeah, a university should be a place where there's serious conversations with a wide variety of perspectives.
Good. Well, high aspirations. I want to go there. So when we talk about higher ed, we always almost talk about three things: access, affordability, and excellence. I want to start with the latter of those, the last, excellence, and ask you about academic excellence at Baylor and what you have done to improve excellence in the time that you've been president. You know, you're in competition with a lot of universities, private and public, to try to attract the best kids from inside Texas and out. I know that your graduation rate in 4 years is about 54%. That puts you close to where A&M and UT are, and they're at the very top of the publics. You know, we can always make these things better, but that's where you are, 70% over 5 years. And when you go after the best students from Texas, when you approach their families, you are swimming in the same water as Rice and Trinity, SMU, Southwestern, the elite private. So what is the case that you make to those families or to those kids? Why Baylor as opposed to those? I know it's not the Baptist part of Baylor, which is so important to it. I know that the self-identified Baptists at Baylor only represent 30% of the student body. So it's not just that as a way to connect them to campus. What is the case you're making for why Baylor?
It is a comprehensive research university, and yet it has the feel of a small liberal arts college. That we know one another, we care for one another, and our Christian commitment is a defining characteristic of who we are.
The culture of the
culture is just astonishing in creating this genuine, caring community where every student is treated as a person of eternal value with complete dignity. And I think it's one of the reasons, frankly, Evan, that we have such a strong minority population. Everyone feels very welcome and comfortable there. We have 1/3 of our entering students are minority, so we're a place that welcomes everyone with excellence. And so we're ranked by the Carnegie Foundation as a high research university. Our aspiration is move on up. Historically, we've been more of a teaching university, but really for the last 15 years, There's always been research at Baylor,
Right.
but it's the degree of research activity which presents great opportunities for our undergrads. And that's something that I think is lost in the conversation.
By extension, they're the beneficiaries of all this work.
They are working alongside not only their professors, but doctoral candidates and postdocs doing very important things, whether it's cancer research or whatever the subject
Right.
may be.
Tell me, though, I want to ask you to be specific if you can. Every president of every university talks about excellence. Every institution wants to promote academic excellence as a calling card for potential students and for donors as well. But tell me specifically, what have you done in these 2.5, almost 3 years to put excellence academically at the head of the line?
Well, we have maintained something that's very important, but I didn't invent it.
Yeah.
So I am building on what others who've come
Right.
before me have done. But the American Council of Trustees and Alumni rank Baylor as one of the 21 universities in the country who have a rigorous curriculum.
Yeah.
One of the issues for higher education is what are the outcomes and what are the students actually studying?
Right.
And so there are 21 out of over 1,000 universities who are given a big fat A for the rigor of their curriculum. So the quality of the education and then the relationship with the faculty at a time when we're talking about online education and so forth, which is a very important topic. At Baylor, we want a residential experience that is a very high quality experience, a high impact experience that's transformational for that student. So we have a relatively low student-faculty ratio. We emphasize 15 to 1.
15 to 1?
15 to 1. And we would like to lower that. But
Yeah.
obviously there's a trade-off in terms of cost and access that you'll come to momentarily.
Right.
We are emphasizing strongly, and we have throughout, and I just like to say it's 21st century Baylor. Throughout the 21st century, I've been privileged to be there for 3 of these years.
Yeah.
The emphasis has been on residential life, to encourage students all 4 years or 5 years to live on campus and to really engage in the fullness of the community that is Baylor. And that's a very attractive calling card, and parents are attracted to that. And increasingly, what we're finding is literally around the world, people are coming, all 50 states, 83, 87 foreign countries in the undergraduate student body.
Now, you mentioned outcomes. There's a lot of discussion in the legislature this session, as there has been for the last couple of sessions, about outcomes on the public university side. That conversation is really about funding based on outcomes as opposed to other things. Obviously, you don't have the same considerations that the publics do, but of course you want these kids to come in, get a great education, and then move on. And as I mentioned, 54% get out in 4 years, 70% in 5 years. I think it's a little bit higher in 6 years. What are you doing on the private side, similar to the conversation on the public side, to help kids understand that we don't want you here forever? We want to get you in, get you educated, and get you into the workforce or whatever you're going to do next.
We're beginning at day 1. In fact, we begin even before day 1, during summer orientation, also during line camp, to say, we can help you through counseling to have this great Baylor experience, but to be complete in 4 years. Yep. What's happening is, and here's a huge countervailing consideration, that is, students want to double major. And then they want to pursue other kinds of opportunities, internships and so forth, which is always very, very good. And so that what used to be pretty common, a 4-year graduation rate, is now just it's difficult for students to achieve and to do everything that they want to do.
Well, as you mentioned,
we do encourage that, because that is also, by the way, Evan, just very quickly, where debt, student debt, which weighs on my mind, this keeps me awake at night.
And this is now rising in this country to be greater than credit card debt, right, is a problem.
That's right, but I think that's an apple and an orange, because this is a lifetime kind of opportunity that one is getting, as opposed to, hey, here's my monthly credit charge. Exactly.
Yeah, but you mentioned the 21st century Baylor. The reality is the 21st century student is just a different student. The profile of a 21st century student, many work, some don't come to school right away out of high school, some take a gap year or longer. It may be that the nature of students is also a little bit different, and so the expectations for the university of those students may need to be different.
Nationwide, that has become very true, that the 5 years, the 6 years is the norm because of these different experiences that students choose to have during the course of an undergraduate education. So it's very different than when we were in college.
Right. The affordability question, let's get to that. So Baylor tuition is roughly plus or minus $16,000 per semester. It puts you completely in the same category as the Rice, SMU, Southwestern, all those guys. If you annualize it, you look at the privates, the elite privates that I've mentioned versus like A&M and UT, which I know are big competitive set schools for you. Kids often come to Baylor. They're also looking at UT and A&M. It's roughly 3 to 3.5 times the cost of going to a UT or an A&M. Not the same product necessarily, but it's a little bit more expensive. I know that's the rack rate. You know, nobody really pays the rack rate in a hotel, and very few people pay the rack rate at a university. They're going to end up paying somewhere less than that. But nonetheless, that's a hurdle for some people to get over. What are you doing to keep the cost of a Baylor education within reach for so many of these kids who want to
Well, I want to pick up on one thing, the rack rate, and that is our discount rate, this off the sticker price, is a little over 40%.
Right.
And that's in the norm.
On average.
And so, on average. And so what we are doing is we're coming alongside families and saying, okay, here is the sticker price, but let's see, we're going to do everything that we can to make this work.
Right.
So that's a university expense. That is university-funded scholarships.
Right.
Now, what else we're doing is raising as much money as we possibly can, day in and day out, for what we've called the Scholarship Initiative.
This was something that you put into play
on day one.
Day one, and you actually just completed.
And we just completed it. We haven't completed fundraising. We have completed this particular initiative.
And that's a $100 million initiative, and that goes to
all for scholarships.
All for scholarships. Merit-based? Need-based?
No, it is just whatever the needs are for scholarships. And so it's a flexible program, but we also have part of the bucket is for athletic scholarships. So someone would say, you know, I love the classics department, however, I love the basketball team a little bit more, or vice versa. So obviously it's donor-driven and donor-crafted. And then we have a missions bucket, because so many of our students feel called to go on mission trips during the summers or during the spring break.
Right.
You know, when people are at the beach, a lot of Baylor students are doing it. It's not unique to Baylor, but it's just part of our DNA, are out really helping the needy somewhere in the world or close to home. So that can be quite costly. How do you get to Kenya? We have a lot of connections in East Africa. So the missions bucket has been an important part.
Ties back to the culture, again, another way in which it ties back to that Baylor culture. You mentioned a third of the student population entering this year is non-Anglo, minority population. A good way to ask you about access and maybe more broadly about demographics. We're in a state that population is changing rapidly. Now we're minority majority. We're soon to be Hispanic majority. Your entering class in the fall is, I believe, about 12% Hispanic, a little bit lower than where it is at A&M and UT, but in fact you have a higher African American population than either A&M or UT. This question of how to attract and retain the best sort of Baylor appropriate non-Anglo students is going to be more and more a focus, I suspect, of the university's attention over time. As the population changes, necessarily the Baylor population will change. What are you doing on that front? How are you getting the best Hispanic and African American and Asian students to look at Baylor seriously? We're
into the schools. Obviously, we provide lots of information, but we're in the schools. But we also have great connections with pastors. There's some 1,200 Hispanic Baptist churches in Texas. And so we have connections with Hispanic pastors. And it's not just Baptist pastors. We have a very large Roman Catholic population. At Baylor. It's our second largest. So that is huge. We also host the largest gathering of Hispanic youth in Evangelical Life, the Baptist General Convention of Texas. 8,000 Hispanic high school students come to Baylor every single year over Easter weekend for a time of worship and fellowship and so forth. So we have very deep ties into the Hispanic community and have historically had great ties into the African American community.
Is the product that you produce at Baylor, given an increasingly non-Anglo population, necessarily a different product? Do you have to tailor the educational experience? You know, we have a lot of discussions in public education right now about the growing Hispanic population and whether public ed's approach to the job that it does will need to change over time as the percentage of kids who are, say, 5 and under really races up from, I think right now there are 44 or 45% of the 5 and unders in the state are Latino. It'll be 70% by 2040. And so public ed is rethinking how it does both budgeting and policy. Is higher ed, and will Baylor specifically have to rethink as the population changes what the product looks like?
Well, I don't think so, and I may be wrong about that, but we do think that there is, in fact, a very important dimension of education, which is this transformational experience in community, and it's in community together. So we want all these red and yellow, black and white. We want everyone to be in community together, and studying right next to one another, whatever the subject is. And so I loved it when Perry Jones III, who's now in the NBA, was interviewed by the New York Times. Okay, what's your coursework like? What's your hardest course? Chemistry.
Yeah.
Well, that's not an African-American course.
Right.
Okay, what's your favorite scripture? Say Christian scriptures. Everybody is there taking it. What's your least favorite course? Theater. I'm finding it difficult to understand Chinese theater.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a terrific bringing together in community of everyone, whatever their background is. Now, we have 286 student organizations on campus.
Yep.
And so people can pour their sense of identity and cultural and ethnic and racial background into their extracurricular work. And what we also find, we have a lot of churches in Waco, is that people will find, our students will find a church community that is very agreeable to them, that is meeting their spiritual needs.
Right.
And so I think holistically that all of our students are finding their place as a member of a caring community.
Because again, the diversity of the religious backgrounds on campus, I think that struck me, I'll tell you. As I think about Baylor, the word that comes to mind is Baptist.
Yeah.
And the idea that only 30% of the enrolled students are self-identified Baptists, maybe it shouldn't have struck me, but it did strike me that didn't seem as high as I would have expected.
Well, we live in a post-denominational world, but we're very proud of our Baptist heritage, and that is the preponderance of the student body, and there are a lot of wonderful Baptist churches in and around campus. But you're right, there are a wide variety of religious faith walks who are represented in the student body. But we have a very vibrant chaplaincy, and I must say, when I think of the new, we just lost our Catholic chaplain to studies in the Vatican, but the new Catholic chaplain is wonderful.
Boy, if you're going to get poached, you may as well get poached by the Vatican. Honestly, well, it's not like I lost him to Stephen F. Austin. You know?
and Father Anthony hails from Nigeria, and he lived in West. It was Father Anthony, our Catholic chaplain, now at the Vatican, who introduced me to West.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he actually lived in West.
Yeah.
But it's a closely knit community, which makes it, it's large, and yet it has that small feel with this beautiful campus.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you this, if people come to our campus, they love the people and they love the campus, and then they see the excellence of the teaching, which is very important. Here's something that is non-negotiable at Baylor. If you want tenure at Baylor, you've got to be a great teacher. Now, you've got to have some other things.
How is that different, President, from any other school? Wouldn't any president be able to say the same thing?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ask them. But I will tell you this. Baylor is very proud and great teaching, in our view, means mentoring.
Yeah.
You've got to come alongside those students in a really meaningful and powerful way and show that you're really pouring yourself into the lives of the students.
Okay, I've waited 15 minutes. Let's talk about Robert Griffin. I really had to restrain myself. What are you doing on that campus in the athletic department? I mean, you all have just turned the world upside down in the last few years athletically. I think for the people who, in this audience and elsewhere, who were big Baylor fans, it may not have come as such a surprise. But to the sort of Gen Pop, I think people are going, well, boy, Baylor is now in every athletic conversation in college sports. What's going on, or is this just basically everything converging to a moment?
I think it's more the latter. Baylor has a great athletic tradition. We have a veteran of the 1952 Orange Bowl right here. We've had great athletic teams over the years. We have been in the national championship for basketball in past seasons. So obviously our track program is world renowned. But I think Robert helped crystallize attention, and Brittany, others who have been so effective over these recent years.
You could hardly have a better ambassador for Baylor athletics than Robert Griffin, right?
He loves Baylor. We love him. He's just a fantastic student. He is the student athlete.
Right.
Yesterday, when it was senior day for our baseball team, they swept the Longhorns. I don't know if you noticed that. But I'm there.
We have security to escort you from the building.
I'm there shaking hands before the game began, and here are the families and so forth. And they're from all over the country. Most of them are from Texas. But here's a guy with a 3.6 in mechanical engineering and so forth. So we're very we very much emphasize you're a student athlete.
Yeah.
3.2 cumulative GPA across the 19 sports.
And there's, I presume, as there are at other universities, fairly stringent requirements. If you're not making these kinds of grades, you're out.
Yeah, off you go.
Right.
And so in many of the debates about the future of college athletics, mine is one voice, but it's by no means alone. I think college presidents feel very strongly these are students who then bring their great talents to bear, and Robert just exemplifies that.
Yeah.
3.68 GPA,
right.
Graduated in 3 years, was working on his master's degree, wants to go to law school, and we hope and plan for him to come to Baylor.
Come back to Baylor, yeah, when the time comes. You mentioned Brittany Griner as well. She also, in the same way that Robert Griffin has been a great ambassador for Baylor on the football side, drafted first in the WNBA. You know, obviously her options from a professional sports standpoint, unfortunately, as a woman, are limited to a greater degree than his are, but nonetheless is going to go out there and carry the Baylor flag as much as she possibly
Absolutely.
can.
We love Brittany, and she's going to do a great job.
On the Brittany subject, I have to ask you, President, about the news from last week. Brittany Griner, as you, I'm sure, read on ESPN or in Sports Illustrated, announced on the day that she was drafted that she's gay. I understand that the Baylor culture is very traditional. There are traditional values baked into that culture. And for a lot of people, it is those traditional values that attract them to Baylor. And the policies of the university really pivot off of those values. If I read the student policies and procedures correctly, I don't know that I'd say you are prohibited from being openly gay or lesbian on the Baylor campus. It reads to me a little bit more like don't ask, don't tell. The old don't ask, don't tell. I wondered if Brittany Griner had announced a year ago that she was gay, as opposed to waiting until the end of her senior year, if she would not have been welcomed back on campus as a result of the policies in place, which, let me stipulate, Baylor is perfectly entitled to have. It's not a question of Baylor being in violation of any rule. I mean, it's a private university. People can choose to come or not. But I'm wondering if Brittany Griner's situation now makes you think at all about this intersection between traditional values and a hidebound culture on the one hand, and the inevitable intersection of the modern world.
Well, we encourage one another. Happily, in our worldview, we all know that we goof up, or we make mistakes, or we make choices.
Yeah.
And part of our loving one another is we accept one another.
Yeah.
We can encourage one another. We can say, here is something I'd love for you to think about, and so forth. But we love Brittany, and we'll always love Brittany. We'll love her unconditionally. And now, of course, she would be welcomed. So
the policy in place at Baylor does not preclude someone from being openly gay on campus. Your reading of the policy is not in any way restrictive, so that a Brittany Griner situation at an earlier point in one's college career would be problematic for the university.
Is it problematic? It's something that we would want to be as loving and caring about as we could, but that person would be welcome at Baylor University.
That person would be welcome. Okay, let me ask about you. So you end up in this job in 2010, having been dean at Pepperdine. You had a long career that was quite celebrated and quite public. People knew you as that guy. Now they have to know you as this guy. People perceive you as having been part of the so-called partisan wars of a different political era. You may take issue with that. But as president of Baylor, you are totally out of that. You have to be president of not just the Baylor that Kelly Hancock and Don Willett went to. You have to be president of the Baylor that Kirk Watson went to. You have to be president of all of Baylor. So can you talk to me about how hard it has been, or maybe not, to transition from the guy you were before to the person you are now, with the job you have now and the outlook and orientation that you have to have now?
Well, I was always drawn to the law, and even though one assignment in particular looked as if I was doing something other than law business.
It's going to dog you forever, right? It's going to be the first line in the obituary.
Yeah. You know, there's a book in Washington called The Plum Book about the good jobs.
Yeah.
But there's also a book in Washington called The Prune Book. This was at the top of the prune book.
A prune.
This is a real prune.
As jobs go, right. Yeah.
But no, I've never run for office. Obviously, I do have views about policies and so forth. I've been affiliated with a particular party over my life. I have First Amendment rights.
Right.
But I've never run for office. I've never run a campaign.
Yep.
I've been drawn to the law. and have been a law officer, both a judicial officer and then over on the executive branch side as well. And I've always had a foot in higher education. So there's actually a continuity in what I've been doing. I taught at NYU.
Yeah.
Taught at George Mason and so forth. I've always had at least a foot, at least a big toe in higher education, really from day one.
Yeah.
Once I graduated, I've even taught at a junior college one semester. So I love higher education. I've always been committed to higher education. So there's a real continuity there.
Yeah, but you didn't feel like there was any need to transition to how you think about running a university versus the work that you did before?
Oh my goodness.
And how did that work before prepare you necessarily for the work that you're doing?
I think lawyers are well prepared, if I may say so, to take on this kind of role because above all, you're a problem solver.
Right.
What are the facts? You analyze the facts. And then you do your best to solve the particular problem. And that's a skill set. Communication skills are obviously very important that lawyers are well trained for.
Yeah. You have, I mentioned in the introduction, argued 36 cases, I believe that's the right number, before the U.S. Supreme Court. You're 25 as Solicitor General of the United States. As you now look at the Supreme Court today, you know, Supreme Court is maybe as well known, the individuals on the court maybe are as well known as almost celebrities in their own right as at any time previously. You have a lot more people who know who Scalia and Alito and Roberts and Kagan and Sotomayor are. The justices themselves seem to be stepping out more as individual brands almost, distinct from the court brand. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? From your, as a longtime court watcher, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. First of all, I believe that the American people need to know much more about the Supreme Court and about our government system generally. Yeah. Baylor, by the way, has been involved with Justice O'Connor in a marvelous program called iCivics that we're using in the Waco educational program to address this issue, not in Texas, happily, but in many parts of the country, essentially a collapse of civic education. And so Justice O'Connor, a native Texan, has taken Baylor and uses our program working with the public school system. Yeah. But in any event, back to the Supreme Court. I think it's good for the justices to be out. I think it's good for us to read the stories of Sonia Sotomayor. She was here in Austin doing a book signing and so forth, doing a lecture. For Clarence Thomas to write, My Grandfather's Son. I mean, people now come to understand them as persons in a really powerful way. And these are great American stories. Then for Justice Scalia and Justice Breyer to take their show on the road about their competing interpretive approaches to the Constitution, I think this is just good for the country. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's, I guess, hard to imagine that we now have a society in which Supreme Court justices go on the Daily Show as a matter of course. But I do wish, and I've that may be a little bit too much celebrity, possibly. That may be a little bit too much, but I do think the next great reform, which it will be a while in coming, is to actually televise the proceedings. Those are you're for it. I've been for it since I was served as Solicitor General. Yeah. It is so important for the American people to see that when issues such as the Affordable Care Act, the meaning of the First Amendment, the religion clauses and so forth, are being argued, I think the American people, if they see the argument itself as opposed to just what the justices say, is let them read the opinion. They're not going to read the opinion. Look at the Affordable Care Act. It's several hundred pages long. If they read the opinion, they may not actually fully understand the opinion. Some of the news organizations who read the opinion didn't understand the opinion. You know, it's Justice Black, Hugo Black, who said that Supreme Court opinions should be written so that they could be read, his words, in the barbershop or the beauty shop and understood by the people. And he wrote that way. He wrote for the people. He was a United States Senator. But these wonderful justices, all of them very able, are nonetheless, they're mandarins. They are students of the law, and they speak in that language. But we can understand the language of the law when we watch the oral argument. Yeah. So in the couple of minutes we have left, let me ask you what happens now. So you've been president, I say, going on 3 years at Baylor. You theoretically have a long-term vision for this university. What's the next big scholarship initiative? At least this phase of it is complete. What is the next big thing that you're going to put out there as president? What would you like to see us talking about if you're back here 5 years from now? Well, we want to complete some of the capital projects. You know, our stadium is a lot of building projects on campus. Right? A lot of it. We have almost $500 million in building, either going on or contemplating. On the residential life, we have a new wonderful East Village, 700 students, 700 beds, wonderful dining facility that comes online in August. The new stadium, August of 2014. And then the Board of Regents just announced the public phase of a building campaign for our new Building and Innovation Campus. We definitely need that space. So we have some space issues we need to complete. What we call the Victory with Integrity campaign for our athletic complex. We just completed an indoor tennis facility, which is very good. We have a very strong tennis program, as you know. But then we want to continue to build on the academic side, bringing in the kinds of professors drawn to Baylor, like Marlon Scully, winner of the Loeb Prize in Physics, John Wood, previously at Yale in chemistry. These are the kinds of high-impact academics that we want to bring in. So that's endowed chairs, more endowed scholarships. That is going to be just sort of eternal vigilance, constant working to raise money for the cost, the access set of issues that we talked about earlier.
Got it. All right, Mr. Starr, thank you very much for being here. Let's give the President a hand. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.